All right, I see us starting up here and folks are coming in. Welcome back, everyone. Glad you could join us again for, this is week 3 of 5-week workshop. And we are so excited that everybody is back for more. This is the Peer-to-Peer World Conference. This is the workshop, like I said. If you want to go to the next slide.
Maybe.
If you don't want to, we can hang out there. That's good. We have a ton of hosts and sponsors to thank for making this a free experience for all the attendees. Cathexis Partners is one of many, and we're glad that everybody is part of this and glad you could make it with us here today. Moving on to the next slide. There's obviously a lot going on. Even today, after this, we're going to have a few more sessions. So definitely, if you haven't signed up for everything, definitely check out those other sessions. And hope you can join us for the remaining 2 weeks. Again, we thought of this. We had this idea. Myself and Carrie and Julie, we kind of brainstormed this idea. We knew that we were going to do this conference over 5 Fridays, so we thought, let's do a workshop over the course of those 5 weeks so that folks can have something tangible at the end of it. So we thought email communications calendar would be a good fit for that. So thank you very much to Julie and Carrie with Susan G. Komen for putting this all together. I've done next to nothing, and they've done all the heavy lifting and made a great curriculum here for everybody. So thank you so much for that. Going on to the next slide. Again, this is week 3. Carrie's going to talk all about calls to action and content. And we're really excited to get into the weeds of that. Still to come is design and deliverability, execution, analytics, and adjustments. So we're at the midway point. Very exciting. And each week we're going to cover theory, reality, best practices, key questions, and assign homework every week. So again, every week we're going to be building on these concepts so you have something tangible at the end of it, either for your first campaign or maybe it's your 101st or 1001st in some cases. Next slide. All right, let's talk about homework. Julie, you want to kind of go over what was covered last week?
Yeah, of course, happy to. So for those of you who weren't able to join us, we went through timing and segmentation with the amazing Joanne from Event 360. For those who were able to join us, you know that our homework is all about looking at what are your timing and segmentation options. So which of the 4 types of events are you? Are you a fundraising event? I can't even think of them right now because I'm on the spot, but we have the recording of last week's session available, so you can check that out and find out what all those 4 are. I'm sure you're very excited to learn. And then based on the type of event that you are, what's the overall timing for your e-com schedule? It's very different based on those 4 types of events. What limits in technology, budget, staff that you have may affect that timing? Are you able to do a 12-month e-com program, or you're a 1-person show and maybe that needs to be more like 3 months? What are all the possible segments you can use? Can you do survivor, past participation? What are the varied amounts of segments that you have? And then what do you really need of those to use? And then because what are those priorities? And then do you have different messages for each of those segments? If you have limits in technology or staff, what are going to be the focus of your priorities? And then definitely work on defining your communications channels: email, social, website, app, texting, phone banking, outreach. Can you, will you, do you want to do all of those things? And then start working on building your communications calendars on a spreadsheet. 1 row per e-com, very basics. What is it? Timing, audience, segmentation, message status. And that'll help you build out your roadmap for success. Hope everyone was able to do that, found it helpful. Would love to hear in the chat if you were like, that was crazy. No way in God's green earth am I doing that. Or yes, I did it and it was awesome. Thanks. That's your homework.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I think with that, I'm going to take over and give everyone an A+, maybe an A+ for effort for some of you. And if this is the first time that you're joining us here, I'm going to do a really quick recap of week 1 and week 2, and would really encourage you, if e-com is a topic that is hot for you, please go back. You can access week 1 and week 2. You can listen again. You can go back and look at a screen again. But I'm going to pretty quickly go through the big thematics from each of those weeks, so that if you haven't been able to join us for one of those and you're hopping in now, you at least will have the perspective of the foundation that we've started to lay. So week 1, we talked about e-com strategy, and we were really clear that before you can start figuring out what you're doing with your email, you actually need to be sure you're very clear on what your program strategy is and what the priority of the program is. Now, as Julie mentioned a moment ago, there are a few different types of programs, and I'm going to cover that in a minute, but we've got to get really crystal clear about what the program is supposed to do in your portfolio before you even think about setting e-com strategy. The next thing we've got to do is really understand who our audience is. And our audience, sometimes we get the reports that say 65% of our audience is women and 45% of them vote Republican. And we get these big buckets of percentages, but we really need to understand that our participants are individuals. Now, we've got a few different ways that they interact with our event. The first one, and I'm just going to go left to right, is an affinity to the activity. I love to ride my spin bike, and so I do Cycle for Survival because it's awesome. The next one is an affinity to the group. So this is my team for work rides, or my sorority president made me do it. And if next year the sorority president says we're doing something else, I'm out of here. The next one is, this is something that my tribe does. My friends and family do this. We plan our summer around it. So it's more about the culture of what I do as a person, and I'm going to keep doing it. The next one is, we actually are celebrating a person that we love. We care about this cause, and it's more than just my people do it, but it's this cause matters to me. And the last one is, I'm doing this because I believe that Memorial Sloan Kettering is the best solution to the rare cancers problem. So going from left to right, we can really see the different types of affinities. So we need to start understanding how our people relate to us. The other thing we need to start to understand is these people are lots of different things to us, right? They're board members, top fundraisers. They could be survivors if you're in the cancer space, which Julie and I are. So we need to start to understand which of these things are important to us to collect and to understand. And as we get a little bit into it, I'm a dad, I'm an activist, I'm a veteran, I'm a change agent, I'm a pet lover. Now at Susan G. Komen, I don't need to know if you're a pet lover, but at the Humane Society, you bet you do. So just getting really clear about who our people are and what information we need to collect in order to communicate with them well. The next one is, we've got to start to get clear about what we want them to do. And we're going to dive really deep in this today because this is the foundation of content. So we talked about, what does email need to do? It needs to make an ask and inspire action across the journey. So we did go through the journey in week 1. First, we've got to get people to say, yeah, I want to do that. Next, we've got to activate them, getting them to do what we want them to do. Then we've got to optimize them. And most peer-to-peer events, there is a fundraising component. So activate is get them started, and optimize is keep them going and doing more. And then finally, we want them to come back. Now, running through all of this is, we've got to keep them informed. The event is here. It starts at this time. You've got to download this app. There's no event at all, but you've got to visit this website at 3 o'clock on Saturday. So we've got to be giving them information. Now, this is a lot that we're depending on e-com to do. The other thing we covered week 1 is, each of these is its own thing, and it also runs concurrently. So we never say, like, we're done activating, we're just going to optimize, because there are people that you're still trying to activate while you're optimizing and retaining and you're recruiting. So this is why what Joanne and Julie covered in week 2 is so important. And that's where we're going to go now. So we talked about timing and segmentation. And we talked about 4 big types of events. And this is what Julie mentioned during the homework. We've got fundraising events. We've got awareness events. We've got activity-based events. And we've got high commitment events. And these are 3 or 4 really different things. Joanne and Julie presented the segmentation priorities based on what type of event you've got. And again, we're going to come back to this. I'm not going to go too deep into it now. We're actually going to build on this. But if you want to do the deep dive, go back and listen to week 2. This also is a favorite slide of mine. This is going to come up a couple more times. But Joanne and Julie talked about not sending an email unless you actually have something to say. So part of the trick with content is we've got to create some things to talk about. The other things that Julie and Joanne presented on week 2, they gave some sample roadmaps. And I know some of these look a little bit bananas, and they are, and you can really deep dive into that. So there's your last 2 weeks in 5 minutes or less, and we're going to build on that and shift gears to calls to action and content. So I showed you this a minute ago. What does email need to do? Make the ask and inspire action across the journey. And we talked about inform. And so I've moved the little inform box down so you can see and remember the 4 different stages of the journey. And it's got to make the asks and inspire action. So we're going to talk about clear calls to action, which make the ask. And we're also going to talk about awesome content, which inspires action. And we're thinking of those things in those 2 buckets. So we'll keep moving along here. And we're starting with clear calls to action. So clear calls to action need to correspond to the stage you're in. And I've created a framework here that I've used in the past. And what we want to do is just put things into 2 columns. As we're in the recruit phase, what do we want to accomplish? And so I've listed a few here. We want new people to join us. So this next column is, what is your working call to action? Look, it's not rocket science. We're going for simple, simple, simple. And as I go through some of these, some of you are going to laugh or roll your eyes. And that's actually the goal. The call to action is, will you join us? We want people who have been with us to come back. So the call to action, will you join us again? Or will you come back? We want you to start a team. Will you start a team? Again, guys, I know the eyes are rolling across the country. We want them to build their team. Will you build your team? So here's the key. It starts with a will you, and it ends with a question mark. It's not mealy-mouthed. It's not, when you join us, you may feel the rush of energy. We're going to get there, but right now we're getting really, really clear on the working call to action. Now, does the working call to action actually sometimes show up in the final product? You bet, but we're not assuming that. So all we're trying to do here is say, during this stage, here's what we've got to get done, and what is our working call to action? Now, I mentioned here, no points for style, there's no fluff, we're boiling it down to the core of, this is the point of this message. Really quickly, I'll go through it and what that might sound like with a few of the other stages. We want to inspire people to fundraise. Will you start fundraising? We want them to jumpstart their team fundraising. So we ask them. Again, it's not rocket science, but we're getting clear on what we need to do and what the call to action is. Inspire donors to give. And look, this one is not one that we are in control of. We actually, in peer-to-peer, need to enable and empower our walkers to make that ask, but we've got to be thinking about that as well. When we're optimizing, encouraging people to keep fundraising, and then teaching people how to fundraise more. So teaching them to ask more often, asking for bigger gifts. And then finally in retain, we want them to come back and we want them to bring their friends. Will you start a team? So again, this is one example of, with a typical peer-to-peer fundraising event, as we go through those 4 stages, how we would map out what we want the message to do and what the working call to action is. So want to step back a little bit now that I've shown you that. Why do we establish these working calls to action? The first one is just to start to get really, really clear on the priority of the message. When you boil it down to that core ask, it helps us set the priority for things. It also is the foundation for the main message points. It's so tempting to throw in language about our survivor parade, or language about how we're all going to meet at the lake and clean it up at 6 p.m. But if we don't know exactly what we're trying to achieve, then some of those messages may not be relevant at a certain point in the overall cycle. It also starts to inform our subject lines, which is really important. It informs our preview content. And I was talking through this and someone said, "No, what is preview content?" And so I just want to show an example. This is a screen grab of my iPhone. And so you can see what kind of weird stuff I get emails about. But you can see right below the subject line is always copy that is preview content. And so often we neglect to get really specific. And I'm going to show you an example of this with that preview content. It can do a massive lift for us in continuing that message. So more reasons we establish these working calls to action. It can inform the links and the buttons. And I know so often we say, we measure things based on, well, did they open it? But also, what was the click through? Now, we want to be sure that the things that we're asking them to click, those links and buttons, actually are core to the message points and really are core supporters for those message points. Moving along, we always want to have a PS. And again, no points for style, no fluff. We're boiling it down to this is the core essence of what we're trying to do here. So we want to have all of this sketched out for each of our messages before we send to our copywriter. Now, I know, it's so cute. She thinks we have copywriters. So I know some people in bigger shops have copywriters, and sometimes that's a luxury and that's awesome, but sometimes we are writing our own copy. And Julie Brock's name is up in the corner of my screen here. And we've got access to some copywriters because we are a large shop. And still, I know that Julie and I have spent hours and hours and hours writing copy and refining copy. And having the core of what we're trying to get accomplished sketched out really helps us refine our message. I'm going to take a little tiny bit of a detour. If you are not reading or at least skimming Seth Godin's blog on a regular basis, I would encourage it. Super easy Google, Seth Godin. He's a marketing expert. He talks a lot about communication and design and how to get people enlisted in what we want them to do. Even to say he's a marketing expert, I don't know that that's exactly right, because he does a lot of different things. But this was actually Seth's blog from about 10 days ago. And I want to call out a few things. I'm not expecting that you all are reading and digesting every word of this, but up at the top, copywriting turns words into action, but which words and which action? So again, we've got to get really clear about what we want the outcome of every message to be. The next thing he says here is sometimes copywriters are not paying attention to the strategy as they're crafting their beautiful words. They don't necessarily take time to think about what this sentence or that paragraph might be for. And it occurs to me as I read this, sometimes I haven't done the best job of documenting my message strategy and communicating my message strategy in the times that I have had the luxury of a copywriter. So let's not make our copywriters guess what we want the message to accomplish. We need them to make it sound beautiful, but it's up to us as the subject matter experts to get really, really clear about what the sentences and paragraphs they're creating are for. The next one here just is the continuation of that theme. Designing effective copy begins with the presumption that you can craft the sentences that support the strategy. And of course, like we're all assuming that we can craft sentences that get us where we want to go. We've got to be sure we've documented and communicated our plans. And finally here, I love this, If it's worth writing, it's worth writing effectively. And this is just my pitch for taking the time to go through the exercise of saying, here's who we're talking to, here's what this message needs to say, here's what it needs to accomplish at the end of the day, so that we're actually knowing what we're writing effectively for. Now, this goes back all the way to week 1. We talked about articulating the program strategy before you set your e-com strategy. And I'm taking a little shift on that. Articulate the message strategy before you start writing. And I would also say, and Mark will talk about this next week, is design. I would say articulate your message strategy before you start writing. And I would say have your copy written before you start designing. I know a lot of times we've got, oh yeah, well, someone designed it, and so now we need copy for this box, and we need copy for this pop-up, and we need copy for, and it's like we've designed something before we've actually thought about what the thing needs to do. It might be 2 sentences, and that's all we need, and suddenly we're creating superfluous copy so that we can fill the spaces that someone's given us. So again, we want to map out all of these things before we start to write. And this is just a little preview for what your homework this week might be. I'm going to take a quick sip and a quick time check, and I'm doing just fine on time. I can actually probably slow down a tiny bit. So, like I said, all of this content planning will actually inform our design. Going to go back and do a couple best practices for subject lines and for that preview content that we talked about. You can Google and you can see tons and tons of 10 tips and 7 best practices, but I wanted to call a couple out here just looking at my own inbox. So looking up here, Parachute, the bedding company, sends me a subject line, if you like new stuff, which piques my curiosity. So yeah, who doesn't like new stuff? Tenement Museum, we all teach, we all learn, starting to tease the content of what might be in the email. Indiegogo, I actually, years ago, and they still haven't delivered, sponsored something, and their subject line is way too long. We're aiming for about 40, technically 43 characters is what will show up in most mail clients. And you can see here, their subject line is off the grid. I can't see what the whole subject line is. Now, Slate gets right to the point. My subscription's gonna renew in a week. And then Sakara is conveying the offer. They're inviting me to join the fall reset. And then The Atlantic is presenting me with a deadline. They're saying the festival is just hours away. And all 6 of these things are best practices. And I actually did go through my inbox and delete a whole bunch of them that weren't helping me convey the message. But these are just some things that as we're designing our subject lines, we want to think about. And not every subject line needs to do all of these things, but these are just some different tactics that are well recommended across all of the research I did and everything that we've seen at Komen as well. Now this preview copy, want to talk about this. Up here at Parachute, it is a literal continuation of the subject line. So what that does here at Parachute is they're just giving themselves more real estate to convey the subject line. So if you like new stuff, you'll love these fresh arrivals. At the Tenement Museum, similar to what the subject line did, they're just continuing to tease out the content of what you're going to see if you open this email. What's new at the museum, digital stories. Now, I'm picking on Indiegogo today. You can see here their preview content says explore new campaign update, and none of that is additive. They're not using their preview content here very strategically. Now, over here at Slate, remember, they reminded me that my subscription is renewing, and they're wishing me happy anniversary. They're reminding me of a milestone, and they say in here, you can see the ongoing support of members like Y, and it cuts off, but they're reminding me why I'm important to the history of Slate. Now, here at Sakara, it's personal. It knows my name. It's a very conversational tone. Now, that's not right for every program, but for a lot of our programs where we do know these people really well, that is very appropriate. So remembering who I am, asking me how my week's going, would love to talk with me about my journey. I don't know, Sakara is a meal delivery service. It's not a weird cult. And then here at Atlantic, excuse me, at the Atlantic Festival, again, it creates urgency, ties back to the subject line, and it's not too late to reserve my spot, just like it might be not too late to register for the Komen Race for the Cure, and ties really nicely back to that subject line, reminding me that the festival is just hours away. So wanted to show those. Again, I could have given you the list of 5 things to do with your preview copy, but wanted you to see it in action and just be thinking lots of these things we can do with our people, particularly being personal, reminding me of milestones and why our people are important to us. And when the time is right, creating that urgency. And we'll talk a little bit at the very, very end about special offers and pricing. If we have a registration fee for our event, we can create some urgency with that, or with potentially a promotion or a fundraising incentive that has a deadline. And those are the types of things that we should be using email for. As I was doing some sleuthing on this, I found the Content Marketing Institute, and they've got lots of different lists, words to pique curiosity, words to inspire FOMO, words to create urgency. So I've got it here on the slide, contentmarketinginstitute.com. They've got some interesting resources there. So here's the punchline of all of this, is taking some time to plan makes it so much easier for whoever is writing the copy, whether it's us, whether it's our peer-to-peer team, whether it's our communications team, whether we've got somebody outside writing copy. Once we make the planning and strategy clear and we get really deliberate about everything, it makes it so much easier for our copywriters, again, ourselves or someone else, to make it all beautiful. They're not wondering, what does this really have to do? And what do they really want me to say? And am I using this word or that word? The more information and strategy we can do beforehand lets us turn our messages into really well-written, thoughtfully crafted pieces that hopefully will help us move people along their experience. So we're going to shift gears now. We're going to go from clear calls to action that make the asks over to awesome content that inspires action. So continuing to think about your audience segments is one of the first things we've got to do as we're thinking about content. Now, I showed you this slide in the introduction, in the recap, and mentioned if you need the full download on this, go back and rewatch or re-listen to week 2. But Joanne went deep into all of this. And again, this is just the different segmentation priorities based on the 4 different types of events. And you can see the 4 different types of events across the top there: fundraising, awareness, activity-based, and high commitment. And Joanne and Julie identified the different message priorities based on what type of event you have. So if this is just an awareness event, you probably don't care too much about current fundraising status. If this is activity-based, may not need to know so much about their participation history because it's a 5K and they're coming to the 5K because it's the 5K that's in their neighborhood. So I want to use just one of these to do an example of how we would start to develop content for each of these. So I'm picking fundraising, and I'm actually going to use number 1 here, current fundraising. So with current fundraising, we've really got 2 buckets, right? We've got people who have not started fundraising. And as we're thinking about content for those people, we really want to immerse them in the why. Clearly, they haven't started yet, and there's something that's holding them back. And we need to create a case for them of how important it is, why they should fundraise, how it helps us further our mission. give them a vision of the kind of change that they can be part of and create. And then there are the people who have started fundraising. They get the why. Just by virtue of the fact that they've started, they know something about what's important and why we're asking them to do this fundraising. So we want to immerse them in the how. They've started and we want them to keep going. So this again is just one example. We're looking at a fundraising event. We're looking at current fundraising. We're saying, okay, these are the two possible segments. And in this case, we're saying we're going to immerse this group in the why and this group in the how. Now, if you were looking at historical fundraising, you would do two different things. People who have fundraised a ton for us in the past, people who have not fundraised a ton for us in the past. And then you would go to, okay, what do we need to communicate to them about in different ways? So what we're going to do now is talk about a few examples of the why and a few examples of the how. And if anybody saw week one, my co-presenter was Jillian Stewart from PeerWorks. Jill actually has just qualified for dual citizenship in the Netherlands, and today she is picking up her Dutch passport. So she is sad not to be here, but she did give me permission to continue to use a few of the examples that she started talking to us about in week one. So she talked about darkness into light, and it's an overnight event that is a fundraiser, and it's a walk, and it's taking a stand against suicide and self-harm. So immediately after someone registers, they get the manifesto email, and they click a link, and it comes over to this beautiful experience that you can see just a screenshot of on the far right side of the page. So this is connecting everybody to the why. There's a poster and there's graphics, and the manifesto is something that they have everybody rally around, so they really understand to the core why this event matters and why fundraising matters. If, again, you were on week one, you heard Jill talk a little bit about dangling the carrot, and we've got the little guy kind of reaching for it and we're pulling it away. And Jill's point here was just when we can show them something that they want and keep them moving down the line, that will help us move them along to what we need them to do. So Jill's got a model here where there are 4 steps. The first one is just saying, hey, like, here's the carrot. You're going to feel great if you do this thing. Whatever it is, again, back to our core calls to action, just suggest it, show them the carrot. The next one is making that carrot bigger. Actually, if you do it, it's not just about you feeling great. It's about making the change in the world that we're all trying to create. So you see that carrot expand in size. The next one is make people feel like they're not alone. People just like you have done this. And I actually wanted to play a video, but my tech has been goofy. So I actually pulled the video out. We'll probably put a link of it somewhere, and I would encourage you to watch it. I've seen it a million times, but just watched it recently, and it brought this big smile to my face. It's a hillside at a festival, and there is this lone weirdo in what look like boxer briefs dancing his heart out. And people are, well, obviously, at least one person is filming him, and people are kind of watching. And within about 15, 20 seconds, another guy joins him and starts dancing. And this lone weirdo has gone into, there's at least 2 weirdos. And surely but slowly, 2 more people come over, and then 5 people, and then 10 people. And then before you know it, the whole hillside has stood up and moved over and is dancing around this lone dancer. And Jill, who co-presented with me on week one, is actually the first person who shared that video with me. And it's always to illustrate the concept of normalization. People like you do this. They can do it. They have a blast doing it. You're going to feel at home here. And you're going to recognize your tribe. You're not going to be alone. And the last one, you can see not only are the carrots big and fat, and there are lots of them, but we're incentivizing. And some programs, incentivization is actually very appropriate. And in some other programs, we've shifted more towards recognition. And so when I say incentivize, it's when you do this, you'll get this. And some other programs, it's more when you do this, we will recognize you as. And either way that your program looks at it is great. Now, want to show you how this actually comes to life in email. So the first thing you can see there is making it normal. And the first line is, just last week, hundreds of people participating in this event did the extra thing and actually started their fundraising. So it's not scary. It's not intimidating. Hundreds of people just did it, and they're people just like you. Now, you can see off the arrow on the right, talk about the impact. Again, that next thing that makes the carrot that much bigger, and it's going to help us bring 20 more people through the therapy sessions, which is really fantastic impact statement. And then down at the bottom, there's the incentive. When you get your first donation, you get your glow-in-the-dark fundraising star. Again, this is an overnight event, and the glow-in-the-dark fundraising star is something that's going to be really catchy. Again, not necessarily a tchotchke or a darkness into light pillowcase, but something that's going to give you a badge of honor, recognition at the event. And again, the reason we went through all of this is because we are talking about e-com copy, and here in just 2 really simple paragraphs, we've checked 3 of those big boxes. The other thing we always want to do in e-com is make it feel really simple. And Jill shared this 5 ways in 5 days series, and these are all just screen grabs of the e-com they actually sent. And day 1 was Facebook, day 2 send a text, day 3 Instagram, day 4 actually print and hand them out, and day 5 is just reminding people to donate. And I don't know if you can see there, I know the screen grabs get a little hazy as we blow them up so big, but did you know the average donor needs to be reminded 3 times? So this series, again, just makes it feel really, really easy and really accessible to fundraise. The next one here is a badging system. So this again is recognition. These are digital badges, and as we've moved so much into digital events, you know, your bragging rights may not be the pin that you wear at your hat on the event, but it may be the badge that you can put on your participant center or on your fundraising page or even on Facebook. I know we've got some photo frames that people are using on Facebook, on Instagram to indicate that they're a top fundraiser. And again, talking about e-com, this is a great message to get out to them. So we really want to start to evaluate and build our content library, thinking about what we need in our content toolbox. Now, to demonstrate the why, we want powerful stats that demonstrate our mission impact. And this is for the people who are more left-brained. I want to know, if I fundraise this much money, what kind of measurable change can we make in the world? And some people are definitely wired that way. And some people want to hear more about the stories and the inspiration, and the people, the human beings that are being served, want to see their faces, want to hear their messages. So as we're thinking about our content libraries and we're thinking about the why, we've got to be sure that we're collecting both of these things as we're going in to craft our messages. Now, to demonstrate the how, we've got a laundry list of ideas here. The first is testimonial from other fundraisers. And the big key here is remembering that we want to normalize. So this might sound like, hey, I'm super busy and I know you are too. There is so much going on in the world. I used this really awesome guide, 5 ways in 5 days. And last week I raised over 600 bucks. This made it so easy for me to fit my fundraising into what I know are crazy days, just like you have. Totally doable. I promise you can do it. So not saying like, oh yes, I raised $100,000 and I am the beacon on the hill, because frankly, there aren't a lot of our participants that can raise $100,000 just like that. I know we want to highlight those people. We also want to be sure that we're making fundraising sound super accessible from fundraisers who are just like us. Another example is fundraisers who are a little bit shy, like maybe not shy necessarily, but not confident asking for money. So here's another type of message. Look, I know it's not comfortable to bug your friends about money, but I read the fundraising guide and there were some really great tips in there. And I made my first ask last week and it was successful. I got $100. The guide helped me remember that it's not about me. We're fundraising to change the world. And it gave me the guide to the ask and it made it that much easier. So again, showing people who are not, I'm successful and I'm in charge and I'm the team captain, but really making it feel accessible. And of course, highlighting the other people who are very successful. That's a great way to steward them. But we also want to remember some people are intimidated by fundraising or they don't think they have the time. Moving on from this, actually, I'm going to back up just one little click here. You might see there written, video, and audio. Audio messages in an email are awesome, and video messages are really, really becoming part of the standard. And these video messages can be used for multiple purposes, of course, in an email, but then you can also push them out through your social channels. If you've got a YouTube space, you can put them there. The video content is not something that you've got to send people into a studio and hair and makeup and lighting and professional makeup and all of that stuff. Right here, you can ask your participants to do this on their phone. I also know for this conference, there was technology that gathered videos, and not making a pitch for any specific platform, but it is so easy now to get user-generated content and to include that in your ecom. Next, to demonstrate the how, a team captain toolkit. Assuming that you've got teams that are part of your event, that team captain toolkit can empower those people who are your ambassadors, making it so much easier for them to train their team on how on our behalf. The next one is a fundraising toolkit. If somebody's not on a team and they want to download that toolkit, just make sure that you've got these. Next is some step-by-step guidance. And the step-by-step guidance can often be disguised as something more fun. Like nobody wants step-by-step guidance, but I'm giving you a contest or a challenge. And for each of these days, you're going to check off a box and do this thing. And at the end of it, you will have achieved the challenge. And guess what? Secretly, we were giving you step-by-step guidance. The same thing can happen with gamification and badges. Again, nobody wants, you must accomplish this list, but everybody wants to earn points or earn badges or beat their other team member. So we can give step-by-step guidance in these tricky ways. Also, recognition programs do the same thing, and earnable gifts and incentives can do the same thing. You get this when you do this other thing we want you to do. Now, I've just gone through this process on this one item, that top one, current fundraising. You could also do it on participation history, and you probably need to. So people who have participated you want to remind them how awesome it was. And I put the word meaningful there in parentheses. You really need to fill in the blank. It was meaningful, it was energizing, it was inspiring, it was totally fun. So again, you fill in the blank based on what you want them to remember your event for. And people who have not participated before really need a picture painted of the experience. Now, again, we go through the whole process. What do you need in your content toolbox in order to do that? And we just quickly went through the process of one of those things as a demonstration. So get clear about what your e-com goals are and which segments are right for you, and then go through that exercise on which content you need. Here at the end, I'm actually going to be just about on time for questions and answers. There are 5 more things I want to talk about really quickly that I think are important as we're thinking about content, but I didn't know exactly where they fit. So back to this slide. Do not send emails unless you have something to say. Here's the great news. All of those things that we just talked about give you something to say. So why am I going to go and create a contest and a challenge? Well, not only does it let you trick them by giving them step-by-step guidance disguised as a challenge, it also gives you a reason to send them an email. I know so many times, and look, Coleman is guilty of this, and Julie, if you could see her, she would be nodding her head. We send register, will you register, will you register, will you register, will you register? And we're not talking with them all the time about something interesting or something new. So we do need these tricks in our bag. Hey, we wanted to tell you we're launching this new challenge next week, and we don't want you to miss out. So again, we cannot message them if we don't have something interesting to say. So these are all tricks for us to give them something to say to them. This slide turned into a couple of different things. The first thing is I was like, oh, I want to talk about special offers and pricing. So I Googled special offer, just looking for an image for the slide. And what I noticed was the color palette. It's immediate. Special offer. I didn't Google special offer red. I Googled special offer. Not an accident. And we're going to get more into design. And look, Mark and Julie and I are not creative directors, and we're not telling you to go against your brand guidelines, but don't hesitate to play with the color scheme when you actually have something new to say. Now that's total non sequitur. That's not what I meant to say here. This is what I meant to say here. Be really strategic about your pricing and your special offers. So if you do have a program that requires a registration fee, you want to be very clear about when you have early bird discounts, when you're offering a special promotion, when your registration fee might go up, when an early bird expires. If there's a last minute pricing increase as you're getting closer to the event. And you want to map all of that out like you're mapping everything else. And again, as we map out the pricing, it gives us a reason to talk to them. It's not just, will you register? Will you register? Will you register? But it's, hey, register before the end of the week because the price is going to go up by $5. Next here is a little experiment that Jill and I love to run. And it's an ask during registration, if you're bold enough to dedicate one of your questions to it. Are you planning to fundraise? And then you segment communication on that. Now, if they say, no, I'm not planning to fundraise, you do not let them off the hook. You're just talking more with them about the why. We're already building out that why content for our people who haven't started fundraising. So if I say, no, I'm not planning on fundraising, you're not off the hook. It's just, I know I need to convince you that it's important that you fundraise so we can see the change we want to make. And if they say yes, then we send them more messages about the how. Again, we're already building these pieces of content for the other segment. So this is another interesting experiment to run if you have the bandwidth and the time. Here's the next one, guys, is know when to leave people alone. It's not a crime. At a certain point, we've got to stop. If we've sent them 82 messages about the thing and they haven't re-registered, they're probably not going to re-register. They're just not into us, and they may just not be into us this year. I do the event every year, but my sister's getting married that weekend, and we're bugging them. At a certain point, you've got to decide, where are we going to spend our communication and content priorities? And it's okay to say, look, these people, we're taking them off the list for now. We're going to stop bugging them. Here's the last thing is cut yourself some slack. As I was going back through week 1 and week 2 and this week, I was like, holy smokes, there's a lot of work to do. And I wish that I could say, at Susan G. Komen, we have done all of this perfectly to its optimal result. And listen, we have not. We are a work in progress. A lot of what we're presenting here is in the ideal state. And so along with the cut yourself some slack message is the perfect is the enemy of good message. So to do even part of this, whether it's all the way back to week 1, getting really clear on your event strategy and who your audiences are, that will help you. And once you do that, if you can get a little bit more clear on your timing and what your segments look like, even just a little bit more clear, that will help you. And this week, if you can start to map out just a little bit more about on every message, if all you did is this is the purpose of this message at the very top before anybody starts to write it, that will help you. So I know, like, I'm thinking of the little girl with the fire hose in her face. Like, a lot of this feels overwhelming and like, holy smokes. And if you can do even just a little bit of it, it will help. So I say that, and I'm about to give you homework. Do just a little bit of the homework. So what's in here is a framework for mapping your message strategy. And this is all of the stuff we've talked about. Who the audience segment is, what we need the message to accomplish. Is it a why message or a how message? And again, I'm assuming this is part of a fundraising event. What is the working call to action? What is the priority of the message? Subject line and preview core elements, links and buttons, and PS. And if you start to map this out before you start, excuse me, before you start to write your copy, you will be in really, really good shape. Somebody asked during week 1, how do you do all this? And I said, I do it with Post-it notes. And again, it doesn't have to be technical. It doesn't have to be fancy. Even if you on your living room wall started to map this out and took a picture of it and sent it to someone on your marketing team and said, hey, can you take a look through this? That would be an awesome step forward. Also on a big whiteboard, if you're not into Post-it notes, see if you can just start to sketch things out on a whiteboard. The other thing to remember is that your whiteboard markers also work on windows. And I know a lot of us are working from home now, and we may not have whiteboards, but we've all got windows. So map this out on a window or a whiteboard. The next piece of homework is more on the content side. And once you complete the message strategy map, you've got to get really specific about which pieces of content are going to help you accomplish your goals. Scan your existing library because odds are you already have a lot of this. It's just scattered across a bunch of different folders and files, and different people have it. There's probably a bunch of stuff that's already ready, and it might just need a little bit of an update. It might need a logo replaced. And look, there's some stuff that you are going to need to build from scratch. And so just start to get clear on these lists. Don't get intimidated by thinking you need to eat the whole elephant, but just starting your toolkit wish list will be really helpful. And then the last bit here is a tip: phone a friend. Call somebody on one of these other teams. It's marketing, it's comms, it's social media, it's mission. They know what your organization has or what's on your organization's roadmap to build in terms of new content. And they also have a really good finger on the pulse for those two things we talked about, knowing your mission stats and your mission stories. They've got all of that right up their sleeve. So do not hesitate to phone a friend, again, as you dive into this. With that, remember the rest of your schedule for today. We're going to talk about branding, rebranding. There's a virtual walk. There's how an audio experience can elevate your fitness event. We're planning one of those on our 3-day event. And then, of course, live streaming, which is going to be awesome. And that's what's going on for the rest of today. And I think we've got about 5 minutes for questions.
Excellent. That was a lot and well done. I love it. Carrie, thank you.
Mark, you always know I'm going to be a lot.
It's a topic that can just keep on going, right? So thanks for that. So yeah, I know we talked a lot about events, and also, there's mention of, different teams and all that. And I think you definitely did refer to it like, hey, you might be a team of one, right? And your event might not be an event, it might be a virtual campaign. So whenever we're talking about any of these things, everybody keep in mind that it could be a virtual campaign. Still, same rules apply, right, Carrie?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And look, I think a lot of our events have become virtual campaigns, and a lot of our virtual campaigns that we've built in the last year and a half are going to continue even when we're back to live events. So yes, I think in terms of the content and how we map it out, all of this holds true. The foundations are the same. We may be downloading an app and logging in, or we may be meeting in the park at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon. We still need to go through the different phases of identifying what our main call to action is, and what kind of content we need to support that.
I love it. Good stuff. And just a reminder for everybody, this is being recorded and will be shared shortly afterwards, as well as the decks. We'll be putting them up in the LinkedIn group. I think I've put that in the Q&A, so you have those links. And definitely, any other final thoughts before we wrap up here, Carrie?
No, I just love this topic. And I think, look, the world of e-com is changing really, really rapidly. I know that Apple is changing the ways that we can monitor deliverability. And I know that's a big topic for next week, is deliverability and design. But I think we need to get a lot more strategic about how we use the channel. And it's been fun to be able to talk through all this.
Terrific. Well, thanks again, Carrie and Julie, and we will see you next week talking about design. So once you have these calls to action, you have your timing, you have your general content, it's time to put a little bit of polish to it all. So looking forward to all of that next week.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.